Just as a quick reminder, the TLDR session is basically a series where we will break down sections of the product, certain topics, this one being recovery scenarios. And the idea is to kind of give you more dedicated sessions on the product, what you can do and how you can turn it into your benefit. Obviously, save time, save money, and make you more efficient and more successful using our product. And with me is my co-host and resident Tony Stark, Sebastian Staub. How are you doing?
Good.
And boy, wow, what a week did we have. I think that doing recovery scenarios in a week where you have such an outage with CrowdStrike is pretty much the best thing that you want for this topic, because they kind of did the work for us. Where were you when the disaster happened?
Oh God. Well, I got to tell you, it was a little bit like post-traumatic stress disorder. Long time ago, when I was working as an admin at the DoD, we had a panel on the side for all of our digital connections, the FIDI cables. And whenever I would come into the office, first thing I would do is look at that panel to see if any of them were orange or red. If that's the case, I knew this was going to be a bad day. And yes, when CrowdStrike hit, it was the same thing. I picked up my phone, got notifications, saw what is happening, and I immediately said, this is going to be a bad day for a lot of people.
Yeah, it was probably actually, yeah. Now they're claiming this is like the disaster of the century or something. Huge impact, 8.5 million units. Oh my God,
Yeah.
that's pretty insane. So yeah, so thank God we're talking about recovery scenarios. And yeah, and I guess that if people weren't convinced that recovery scenarios is an important topic, so we prepared a short slide with a few facts about recoveries. Every 11 seconds, there's a company hit by ransomware, $9,000 per minute for large organizations in downtime, 4.5 million average cost on the data breach, and 2-hour downtime to resolve a recovery. And yeah, not to mention the occasional update that Microsoft throws, and you never know if how that's going to turn out. Apparently, this is quite a big topic for us, and I know we have a lot of customers. Surprisingly, there are the ones who are implementing recovery scenarios, and there are the ones who just didn't have the time to do it. And that's very unfortunate, because in some calls that we have with our customers, we discover that they're doing a recovery successfully, thank God, otherwise they won't be our customers. But there's a way to automate it, and it's so much easier than just doing it manual. And it's already in your product, and it's already included. So, the idea is to give you an idea on how to take advantage of it. And you mentioned you being on kind of the admin seat in DoD. How does that look like? How did you
Well,
tackle recovery?
well, it's pretty much the same thing. I mean, nothing has changed, even though that was a long time ago when dinosaurs roamed the earth. But I mean, recovery scenarios. I mean, picture this: it's a sunny Tuesday afternoon. The birds are singing. The coffee machine is working overtime, and you're just about to dive into your latest project. And then, out of nowhere, bam! Disaster strikes, and your server's gone down faster than my willpower at a dessert buffet. Panic sets in. It's like that moment when you realize you've left your wallet at home right when you're about to pay at a grocery store. And that's where the magic of disaster recovery orchestration comes in. It's essentially a trusty sidekick. It's kind of like Han Solo and Chewbacca, minus the space adventures. Although, if anyone is wearing a Wookiee costume right now, hey, no judgment here, you do you. But disaster recovery orchestration is like having a superhero toolkit at your disposal. You've got your cape, your utility belt, and of course, your foolproof plan to rescue your precious data from the clutches of chaos. It's all about being prepared, because let's face it, disasters don't schedule appointments. They show up like a sudden power outage. You're never ready, and it always seems to happen just when you're about to save your work or save the world if you're a gamer like me. Let's make sure you're prepared. And what we're going to do is we're going to dive into the nitty gritty of disaster recovery orchestration. We'll
Yeah,
talk about
go
setting
for
up
it.
automated recovery processes, ensuring minimal downtime, and making sure your data is safer than a Wi-Fi password at a hacker meeting. And we'll explore how you can turn the worst case scenario into just another day at the office, or at least a day where you don't have to hide under your desk. And I can neither confirm or deny having done that. So we'll turn those disaster blues into recovery gold. And by the end of this webinar, you'll be so prepared for a disaster that you might even start hoping for one. Just kidding. Please don't do that. Nobody needs that kind of excitement. I think it's like a colleague of mine used to say, some unrehearsed disaster recovery situations are resume triggering events.
Yeah, for sure.
And peace of mind is what we're aiming for. Our administrator, our backup hero, is like Scotty, the chief engineer down in the engine room. Scotty is the guy who is knee deep in wires, covered in grease, frantically trying to keep the work core from exploding. And he's the one who gets things done, often probably muttering phrases like, "I'm giving her all she's got, Captain." God, that was a terrible Scottish accent. I need to work on that. But anyway, that's our administrator, always in the trenches, tackling problems head on and somehow making miracles happen with duct tape and sheer willpower. Now, on the other side, we have the C-level executive, our very own Captain Kirk. Captain Kirk stands on the bridge, staring heroically into space, making grand decisions about the fate of the entire crew. And he's got the big picture in mind, always thinking several light years ahead. While Scotty's down in the engine room, sweating bullets, Captain Kirk is up on the bridge, looking confident and debonair. When disaster strikes, Scotty, our administrator, is frantically pushing buttons and pulling levers trying to stabilize the system. And he's the one who feels every tremor and hears every alarm. He's thinking, how can I fix this right now? Meanwhile, Captain Kirk, our C-level executive or manager, is calm and collected, strategizing the next move. He's focused on the overall mission, considering the long-term implications of every decision. So while Scotty worried about whether the ship is going to blow up in the next 5 minutes, Kirk's thinking about how they're to get to the next crisis and make it to the next star system on time. So in the end, both roles are critical, crucial. Without Scotty's technical expertise and hands-on approach, the ship would never stay afloat. And without Captain Kirk's visionary leadership and strategic planning, well, the ship would have no direction. It's the perfect balance between immediate action and long-term vision. So as we dive into the orchestration of disaster recoveries today, remember, whether you're channeling your inner Scotty or your inner Captain Kirk, both perspectives are vital. Just try not to mix them up. We don't need Captain Kirk trying to fix the warp core with a paperclip, and we certainly don't want Scotty making intergalactic treaties. So let's dive into a live demo where I'll walk you through the key features and functionalities of our disaster recovery orchestration solution. And it's almost like, I mean, Alon and I, we talked about this. It's almost like a conspiracy theory. We couldn't have hoped for something more important in the week where we're doing recovery scenario webinar.
Totally.
All right, so this, what you're seeing here, that's our console. You're already familiar with this. That's the N2WS Backup and Recovery console. When you log in, that's when you're going to see the dashboard. Tells you everything that happened in the last 24 hours. So let's talk about recovery scenarios. You're going to find this over here on the left side of the screen, recovery scenarios. And as you can see, I have a bunch here already defined. These are some failovers in Azure and within AWS. And this one is really the worst case scenario. So I have it configured as a failover from Virginia to Ohio, different geographic location, and at the same time, also perform a failover into a different account altogether. So it's really the worst case scenario. We're going to pretend that we lost a region, and at the same time, we pretend that we're going to have to switch accounts at the same time. The first thing that you want to set is scheduled testing. Scheduling, automating, test. This is really the most important thing. This is super easy to define. First off, you choose what's the destination account. Where's this data going to end up? And what's the destination region? And then down here, this is where you set the schedule. And as luck would have it, I have some of those. So I have a quarterly one. Most companies do what, 1-2 DR drills a year. Why? Because, well, it takes a long time, and it's very cost intensive as well. because, well, you're spinning up resources, it's manpower that you're using up, and entire weekends go away. So you have two options here. One, you have the option to spin up the resources. This is really going to perform a real life disaster recovery, either test or if it's actually happening, you can do it right then and there. The only downside on all of this is, as I said, there's a price tag attached. Microsoft and Jeff Bezos are going to love you because, well, you're spinning up resources, and that's going to then have a price tag attached to it. On the other hand, there's also a more cost-effective version. It's called the dry run. Dry run gets you 98% there with a lot less layout and cost. So what this is going to do is it's going to actually check, do I have access to the accounts, to the encryption keys, to the snapshots, to the permissions, to the different geographical regions? Do I have everything I need, just short of triggering that command to spin up the resources? If you can live with that, there is absolutely no cost involved. And when there is no cost and it's completely automated, nobody's losing their weekend, well, then I can perform DR testing far more frequently. Why not do it weekly on a Saturday? Because it's completely automated anyway. Now, of course, you could also do a combination of the two. So you could have, for example, one spin up where you're spinning up the resources for real, quarterly or twice a year, however often you want to do this, and then do your weekly dry run. Nothing going to keep you from doing this. Now, when you do spin up resources, one of the things you want to do is you want to not just see, yes, the resources are running, they're up and running, they were turned on, they were spun up, but you also want to see that they're actually working. So, and that's why over here for the agent scripts, this is really flexible, because what you can do here is you can run some connectivity tests. You can run some functionality testing. So in this case, hey, is my database actually performing transactions? Are my application stacks working? Are they talking to each other? So that's exactly what these agent scripts will do. It's a little misleading. It doesn't really require an agent. It's just simply a script that we're triggering in that environment. And then we're going to set this off on those different resources. So this is really important because this is going to perform your connectivity and functionality testing as well. Another thing that's also really important is when you choose the resources that you want to test. So under recovery targets, you can choose which resources you want to spin up. As you can see, this is just a lab environment. There's just two resources in this case, but NWS backup and recovery scales extremely well. It makes no difference if it's 200, 2,000, or gosh, I have one customer who performs regularly testing of 44,000 resources. So the system just simply scales to that. And when you're getting to those numbers, 200, 2,000, 20,000, then this is really important as well. It's the recovery order. So in which order are we spinning everything up? You probably don't want to spin up everything at the same time because, well, some resources like to spin up before others. It's kind of funny because I have some Windows resources here, and Alon, I told you about this earlier. So when I had Windows servers, that was always a problem child in my environment because, well, if you have Active Directory, just as an example, and you have resources which
dependencies,
the dependency, exactly. If you have dependencies on certain resources, well, that's when you want to use that recovery order. You want to make sure that those resources that are the base for your environment spin up first. So this is exactly what you use this for. Now, something else that's really important is talking about Windows servers, especially. You don't want to spin up a clone of a resource into the same network. That's just a recipe for trouble. Again, it's one of those things I have actually seen happen before. If you spin up a clone of an Active Directory server into a live production environment, all hell is going to break loose. So you don't want to do that. You want to make sure that your resources are spinning up into their own environment, especially if your production environment is still up and running. So you can do that as well. And the way that works is just simply choose the resources and click on configure. See, right now everything is auto-assigned, which means, okay, we're going to spin it up exactly as it was when we performed the backup. But you can override any of these settings. So if it's just for DR testing and we're talking about cost, does all of the different resources, do they really have to be the same size? Probably not. So why don't we spin up smaller servers, and that's going to save us money. So that's an option. The other option is, well, you can also make configuration changes, and down here you can make changes to the network configuration. Of course, I don't want to spin all of those tests up into the same VPC, into the same subnet. And you can make these changes right here. Heck, if I wanted to, I can even change the IP address altogether. So it's really important that you configure your network and make sure that the tested network doesn't interfere with your real production environment. If you're wondering, well, how am I going to do that? I need to spin this into a network. We do have a network cloning component within the product as well. Personally, I think it's best to prepare this beforehand. Yeah, you can do it when something happens, but you know how it is. Once there is an outage, everybody's going to start ringing your phone and fix it now, fix it now, fix it quicker, fix it 5 minutes ago. So really, you want to be ready for that moment when you press that button to perform the failover. The way you can do this, and this is where this configure button is going to make a lot of sense, is if you go to accounts. Under accounts, you're going to see all of the different accounts that we have access to that we're going to perform backups and restores into. And this can be Azure, this can be AWS, you name it. So when you want to see the inventory of all the network configurations that we've backed up in your environment, just click on this and click on Clone Network Entities. That's going to show you the entire inventory of network configurations that we've backed up. And you're going to be able to see VPC settings, subnet settings, routing tables, VPN connections, transit gateways, load balancers. Every meaningful object in your network is going to be backed up and available here. It's going to show you all of the different regions where we recognize network configurations that need to be backed up. And then, of course, down here, you also have the different ones. The nice thing about this also is, see, captured at. So it's going to create backups of your network configuration if we recognize a change in the network configuration. I am absolutely sure that people have seen this before. Somebody makes a quick change to a network configuration to make something work, and they fail or forget to document this. Okay, so then how can I say which one is my gold network configuration? So I can actually go back in time and I can see when somebody made a change to the network configuration. So if somebody says, hey, that Windows file server, I want this to be exactly in the same state it was in on November 16th, 2020, I can do you one better. Not only can I bring back the resource from that day, but I can also bring back the network configuration as well. So once you make that choice, and you can choose where I'm going to clone this network configuration to. And this can be any region, this can be any account, and you can also change the name. Obviously, that's what you want to do. Think of the naming convention of your cloned network configuration. When you press this button down here, it's going to do just that. It's going to take this network configuration and it's going to clone it here. This can be any region, could even be the same region and the same account. Just make sure that you're going to say, well, that's my disaster recovery clone of my network. Something else that you can also do is over here, the VPC CloudFormation template. If you do feel so inclined, you can take this network configuration that we've captured for you and export it as a CloudFormation template. I almost want to say it gives you, like, in air quotes, a hard copy of your network configuration. You can make changes to it, and also a nice thing, you can then use that to recreate network configurations in Azure. In case you want to fail over from AWS resources into Azure, want to make sure that your network configuration goes there as well. Yes, Azure doesn't speak CloudFormation, but it does speak Terraform. And well, once you have a CloudFormation template, you can just simply use one of the online tools to turn your CloudFormation template into a Terraform. So this is really important. This is your network configuration, and this is the base. This is the base to then create that really true representation of your network in your designated disaster recovery region or account where you want to perform your testing. Something else that you also want to keep in mind is if we're talking about scheduled testing, right? So if you create a schedule here and you say, okay, I want to create a quarterly test, I want to spin this up, and I want to completely automate this process, you can. And wouldn't it be great to get a report on this? Of course you can do this. So all you have to do is just choose your email address and then hit the save button, and then in quarterly intervals, the product is going to completely, fully automatically do all of the recovery testing that needs to be done. And that report then contains everything that I need to then submit that as my successful DR testing. Remember, that's where the captain comes into play, because that's going to be very interesting, because you have that audit proof that you've done it. Something else that's really important here as well is that email that you're going to get. So there's different ways you can configure how that email is going to be sent. And you're going to do this up here under the server settings. So when you select server settings and then go to email configuration, this is what we're going to use to send these emails. You can either use AWS SES, the simple email service, if you trust Amazon. And if for whatever reason you say, no, I don't want to use their service, I actually want to use my own mail server, you can do that as well. So this is where you set this up. And at that point, nobody's going to lose their weekend, because your DR testing is fully automated, the connectivity testing is automated, the functionality testing is automated, and at the end, I'm going to get emailed a report, which then tells me that everything went fine, or heck, if it doesn't work fine, then you're going to see exactly what failed and why it failed. All right, so we talked about recovery scenarios, your disaster recovery scenarios, your orchestration, and how to really schedule this for an interval that fits for you. Once this is all done, of course, you can trigger this in case of the next CrowdStrike outage. I can trigger this manually. So that means I can go to my recovery scenario and say, okay, 3 minutes ago, 850 of my servers went dead. So I'm going to recover them now, and I'm going to recover all of them. All you have to do is simply click on Run Scenario. And then it's going to say, okay, sure, which backup set would you like to use for the purposes of this? Because the configuration that we made can be applied to any of these backup sets. Well, in my case, probably the one from last night. Just choose that, click on recover, and minutes later, you're going to be back in business. Of course, whenever you want to ad hoc, you can also use a dry run as well, just to check that everything is configured right. Once you perform that failover, another thing you really have to think about is the failback, because every crisis eventually ends. So if I perform a disaster recovery into a different region, into a different account, gosh, even into a different cloud provider altogether, at some point, I want that data to be returned. And the way you do this, the fallback, is simply create a backup policy. So what I did here is I created one. So that's my fallback from Ohio to Virginia, opposite direction. And you don't need a lot of generations here, just one, because that's the only one you need, because you're going to perform a failback into the original region. And you don't even need to schedule this, because it doesn't have to be scheduled, because you're going to run this ad hoc when you want to perform the failback. The backup targets right now, it's empty there because I haven't performed it yet. But of course, if I have 850, 2,000, 20,000 resources, I don't want to do this manually. So that's why we can also use tagging to collect the resources that need to be failed back to the original region. And the way you do that is under More Options. So we can collect the resources to be failed back with the custom tags. And you can use any number of tags, either tags that already exist on those resources, because when we recover them, we preserve the original tags. But you can also use additional tags. Well, when you perform a recovery, we have the ability to assign custom tags to a resource. So what I do, it just makes most sense to my brain, is I add an additional tag to all of the other tags that are already on there, recovered, and the tag value is yes. Okay, that makes it then easy for me, because when I perform the return journey, all I have to do is I'm looking for the tags on the resources recovered, yes, and collect those. And then suddenly my backup target's going to then populate, and all of the resources I can then put back to where they actually have to be. So that's really all there is to it. Think about, I think the takeaway is here, do the scheduled testing. So don't hold back, because it's completely automated and there's no work involved once the configuration is done. The other thing is the connectivity and functionality testing can be done within the backup solution itself. Then the recovery order is something to think about. Then the configuration, the pre-configuration of your network. Again, it's not something you have to do manually, because the data is already collected. You just choose where would you like us to recreate the network configuration. And then, of course, you also want to get your reports. And that's really all there is to it. And then at that point, you can be sure that nothing terrible is going to happen on those weekends where you normally would spend a lot of time then performing under normal circumstances your backup recoveries.
Couple of questions that I have here. So first is on the reporting. The question is, what does it cover or include, and is it suitable for audit purposes?
Yes, that's a good question. Yes, so absolutely. In that scheduled report that you can have as part of the recovery, it's going to include everything. So it's going to include all kinds of information, such as, yes, it was spun up, if it ran into an issue. All of this data can be filtered out as well. So just as an example, let's say I made a mistake in the configuration and I said, yes, configure it, spin it up into the same region. And let's say my production environment is still up and running. What's going to happen? Well, you're going to have an IP conflict. That's not going to happen. So it would immediately capture this, and that's going to be in that report as well. So really all the information that you need for a successful audit is going to be in that report.
Okay, the second one is kind of kind of funny to me, because we had a call with a client this, I think, last week, that had a similar situation. Does it really replace 9 people, and can one person do the drill instead of 9 people performing it?
So the short answer is yes, for sure. I would even go one step further. I would even say that, well, once it's configured, it's no people have to be doing it. Once it's configured, it's configured. You can just keep running it forever long you want to. So yes, and there is no weekend, no after hours testing necessary, because the system can do it completely fully automatic for you.
So thank you so much, Sebastian. Thank you everybody for joining. Please join us next month, August 8th. We're going to talk about another super important topic, security and ransomware. Thank you so much.
Bye, guys.
Bye, everyone.